Joining us now, Katie Koch, co-head of the fundamental equity business at Goldman Sachs Asset Management. Katie, great to have you with us. Want to ask you about the overall market levels. S&P 500 Dow just off of record highs hit on Friday. Does that mean that we've priced in the worst case scenario for Delta, that we priced in the risks from inflation? What's your view?
We really believe that earnings are going to have to continue to come through to support equity markets at these levels. So I think the focus that you have on this morning and in general on the Delta variant is well placed. We need to make sure that the economy continue to have a strong growth rate, that growth rate can translate into earnings, and that those earnings will support equity markets. So if there's one variable that we're focused on here, it is the Delta variant.
Are there sectors that concern you more than others in terms of those earnings coming through to support valuations?
One thing I would say, just taking a step back, it's actually worth taking a look at the earnings season we just went through, which of course was one of the best we've had in 20 years. And actually, you've had strong earnings across all sectors. And you've had about 86% of companies reported at this point, close to 90% of them beating expectations. The three big themes that continue to come out are inflation, continued digitalization of those companies, and some of the COVID winners retracing a little bit in their strength. But overall, it's been actually quite a strong earnings season with strength across all the sectors. And I would say that company management teams actually continue to be quite constructive. So unlike some of the economic policymakers who are saying that this inflation is going to be very transient, we're actually hearing something really different from our companies, which is that, they're not economists, but in their mind, they need to see some degradation in demand or a lot of supply coming to the market. And they're not really seeing either of those things. And so inflation definitely continues to be a concern.
I want to hit on that point a little bit more, Katie, because we've heard, particularly in the auto sector, that some commodity cost inflation will persist till next year. On the wage inflation side, we were having a conversation with Frank Luntz, the pollster, about the Delta variant and what employers can do. And it sounds like employers, it's a workers' market, if you will, in terms of where they can choose to work and whether or not they can get vaccinated because of the shortage of qualified and skilled workers out there. And so in your mind, is inflation really worse than what economists are predicting? And how do you factor that into your view of the markets?
This is, of course, really important because so far, not only have we had these, great sales and the economy's recovered, but companies have been able to maintain margins, which means they've been able to translate those great sales into earnings. And in order for them to continue to keep doing that, they are going to have to be able to pass through these costs to the end consumer. You asked a question around wage inflation. We know that wages have been reset to pull labor back into the market, but inflation, of course, requires continued upward pressure on that. So that's a data point that we need to monitor. I will say some of this reset is actually quite healthy because we know we do have an issue of income inequality and we want the consumer to be strong. So it is a workers' market at the moment. And actually, that's good news on a lot of fronts. So Honeywell was the most recent one, came through and put a 10% wage increase for factory workers. And on average, this should be good if the consumer is healthy and the companies can pass through the cost. And so when we look at companies across sectors at this point, the parts of the market that are probably the most vulnerable are some of those industrials and staples companies, and active managers need to really weed through all of these companies and identify the ones that are going to be able to maintain margins in the face of high inflation.